Hey everyone, Jake here from CVP. In all my years working here, one thing that I, as well as all my colleagues, have been asking Canon to do is make more video focused versions of their popular zoom lenses. And I think they've kind of listened, as today we are taking a look at their latest RF mount lens. This is their new 24-105mm f2.8, and it's aimed to be a hybrid lens with a slight more focus on video. This lens we have with us was sent to us from Canon for a day to test, and it's a very early pre-production sample, so stuff may change in regards to cosmetics and overall performance. This new lens has been designed to sit in between the RF and CNE line, as a new hybrid series of lenses that draws influence from all of their existing lenses. Their photography, cinema and broadcast lenses have all inspired this lens, and it kind of sits in the middle of them all, trying to do a little bit that all three of them can do. It's built from the same solid plastic outer shell as the RF lenses to help keep the overall weight of the lens down. While it's certainly not a small lens, I was actually anticipating it to be a bit wider and bigger than it is because of the specs it has. Its form factor reminds me of the old EF 7200mm f4, and it's nice to see that it focuses and zooms internally as well, like these old EF zooms did, as it's quite rare to see this with RF mount lenses now. It has a front filter thread of 82mm, which is pretty standard for these higher end RF mount lenses. It weighs roughly 1,330 grams, which is heavier than most of the other RF mount zooms with comparable focal lengths and apertures. It's not light by any means, but certainly not heavy considering its size, spec, and 23 elements in 18 groups housed inside. The collar for mounting it directly to a tripod is a nice design. It's detachable without removing the full collar from the lens. This is the first Canon RF mount lens to feature the ability to control the iris via a D-clicked ring. This 32-step ring allows you to really dial in your aperture smoothly and precisely, but you can also set it to an auto mode by going to the end stop and clicking up the lock release here. With this on, you can now control the aperture on the camera or have it adjust automatically. It weirdly can't be clicked, which is rather odd and may be a bit annoying for some people. It also features a control ring at the front of the lens, which is incredibly helpful. You can define this in your camera's menu, and with the aperture being controllable on the lens now, I personally would choose to use the select subject function, as it could be really helpful when using the excellent autofocus on RF mount Canon cameras. The lens also has two function buttons, one on the top and one on the left hand side. By default these toggle focus lock, but you can rebind them in the menu system to a few other functions. There are also 4 switches on the side of the lens. The first is a focus limiter, where you can choose between the full focus range or a limited 1 meter to infinity range. You then have an AF/MF switch, and then your 2 stabilizer switches. One to toggle it on and off, and then the other to switch between the 3 different stabilization modes. Mode 1 is standard, Mode 2 is tailored for panning, and Mode 3 only enables during exposure. The lens is rated to provide 5.5 stops of optical stabilization, which can be increased to 8 when paired with the sensor stabilization in some of Canon's cameras. From our time with the lens, the stabilization looks incredibly solid. At 24mm, we can see that it's not perfectly smooth, but also doesn't have any horrible warping in the corners. On the long end, it performs really well. If you want to keep up with the latest and greatest kit, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to buy anything you see in this video, or want to get your hands on this new lens or any other kit for that matter, head over to cvp.com where our experienced team is waiting to help you. I think one of the big things that will hold back this lens will be the lack of RF mount cameras to use it on. For photography, there are certainly a good few options with the R3 and R5 cameras. However, for video, you really only have the R5C and C70 from Canon, and then the Red Komodo and V-Raptor cameras. Canon really need to open up their mount for more cameras to use and release some new video and cinema cameras that use RF. Canon haven't released anything into the Cinema EOS line since 2022 when they announced the R5C. Fingers crossed next year will be a big year for Canon, and hopefully this new lens is a sign of things to come. We wanted to quickly make a little comparison between the 24-105 f4 and the 24-70 f2.8 RF zooms, so we grabbed a shot at 24mm, 70mm and then a 105mm. Looking at 24mm, we can see a clear difference between the 3 lenses. The new lens is considerably sharper here. It's incredibly impressive how detailed the footage is as we zoom in, given just how wide the frame is here. The 24-105 f4 looks to be the softer out of the 3, even with the extra stop of depth of field. At 70mm, the new lens is still the sharpest, but the other two lenses are closer than at the wide end. Weirdly, at the same focal length, keeping the camera and the subject distance the same, the new lens is a lot tighter. At 105mm, the newer lens does look sharper. However, the overall image of these lenses in this scene all look quite similar, so if you want to grab this new lens to be used alongside other Canon RF lenses, it should cut really nicely with them. This new lens has been designed to cover a traditional 36x24mm full frame sensor. So for our tests, we chucked it on our R5C and snapped some stills across a range of different focal lengths, apertures, and focus positions on our lightbox. At 24mm, we can see some hard vignette in the corners of the frame. Canon have said that this is because the lens is a pre-production sample, and the R5C doesn't apply the correct corrections needed to get rid of this. However, we can at least get an idea of how this lens could potentially perform if you have these corrections turned off. So if you use it on like a red camera, for example. This vignette does go as you zoom though, and in the R5C's 8K video mode, you won't see it. At 35mm, there is still some harder vignette, but it's nowhere near as strong as it is at 24mm. Past this, performance is very solid, with only slight light loss towards the corners of the frame wide open, and excellent performance when you stop down to f4. Fingers crossed, full production versions of the lens and up-to-date Canon cameras will correct the harder vignette. We will update our pinned comment below when we get a chance to test it. Right, let's take a look at some bokeh. Across the range, there are some key characteristics that we can observe. We can see that our autofocus highlights have a very defined edge to them. At the wider end, it has more colour around the edges, whereas at the telly end, we have a touch more spherical aberration around them. But it looks pretty clean overall, even when racking through the focus range fully. We can also see a good amount of onion skinning, which is decentered across the frame. This kind of texture is quite common with Canon lenses though. Wide open shape in the centre looks really good, and the 11 blade iris does a good job of forming a circular shape even stopped down to f5.6, though you can definitely see the shape of the blades here. Wide open towards the corners of the frame, we can see misshapen bokeh, and this does get a touch worse as you get towards the longer end. However, it does improve as you stop down though. Overall, it has a very modern look. It's a clean, sharp lens that will give your background some more bite. A lens's flare characteristic is a very subjective thing. So for these examples, we grabbed a torch and blasted it down the barrel of the lens at each focal length. We tried to keep the torch in the same position, but did move the camera as we changed the focal length. As we can see, the flare looks pretty consistent throughout the zoom range. It's more green in colour and has some nice rainbow touches to it as well. Right, let's take a look at how the lenses can resolve our chart. For these, we are using our Canon R5C in 8K 16:9 and moving our camera further away from the chart to try and match framing as much as possible as we zoom. At 24mm, we can see in the centre that the lens performs very well. It resolves our chart really well with minimal chromatic aberration. Towards the corners, we can see a touch of colour aberration and lower resolving power though. As we stop down, the centre performance improves a little bit, but in the corner, we can see a larger improvement in performance. At 35mm, the centre is rock solid, with very minimal improvement stopping down to 5.6. It's incredibly sharp and clean here. In the corners wide open, we can see a resolution drop off though, with a touch of colour and spherical aberration. At f5.6, it really does bite up here though, but there is still a slight touch of colour aberration. This performance is pretty much consistent through to 105mm now. It's sharp and clean in the centre, with a little bit of roll off to the corners, which bite up if you stop down. We also shot these same tests with a 24-70 f2.8 RF to see how it compared to this new lens. In the centre, the new lens is slightly sharper, but in the corners we can see a larger difference, with the 24-70 having less resolving power and more chromatic aberration. We shot these without moving the camera or chart, and we can see that the 24-105mm has a reduced field of view compared to the 24-70 at the same focal lengths. When it comes to distortion, I made sure the option for correction was enabled in the camera, as realistically that's how most people are going to use it. With these on, it performs very well. Throughout the range, we can see very minimal pincushion at the wide end, which turns to more barrel at the telly end, but it's very subtle. One thing that we did notice was that if you zoom quickly, you can see the lens's actual distortion profile until you stop or slow down. My theory is that the lens or camera can't keep up with the correction when zooming quickly. It also results in this weird warpiness to the corners when you hit the wide end during a fast zoom. This is obviously a pretty extreme example, but worth understanding if you're planning to use this zoom like this. Hopefully this is something that Canon can fix in firmware. For our focus breathing examples, we are pulling focus through the entire focus range, so this will look exaggerated versus a real world scenario. Starting at the wide end, we can see that at 24mm there's a good bit of breathing. We can also see the distortion changing as you go from close focus to infinity. As we zoom in from here, we can see performance improve gradually as we go through the focal lengths towards the longer end. Considering its size and focal range, I think it performs pretty well here. The focus mechanism that the 24-105 2.8 uses is focused by wire. However, it does feel decent to use when putting focus manually. I do wish though that the manual focus distance scale was visible in the video mode like it is in the stills mode on the R5C. I would have actually personally preferred a clutch focus mechanism, like that on some of Panasonic's L-mount lenses, where you can go between autofocus and manual focus and get a nice, clear and decently consistent set of markings when manual focusing. The 24-105mm has been designed to be what Canon is calling electronically parfocal. This uses the focusing motors to correct your focus as you zoom. When zooming slowly, this works pretty well. However, when zooming faster, you can see focus shifting. However, if you're zooming fast in the real world, this may be less noticeable than us using a chart here. It also looks like the tracking on our setup is out of touch. This could be a lens issue or a sensor issue, but still something worth noting. The lens has a close focus of 45cm, which is pretty good for the focal range. It features dual nano USM motors, which helps with the solid autofocus performance. On the R5C here wide open, it performs very well. From all of our tests and shoots that we've done, the lens looks very clean of chromatic aberration, though this could be from the camera applying aberration correction, but that's how most people are going to use it. With the lens being more video focused, it also has an optional servo unit. This is a much smaller attachment than Canon's other servo units from their C&E line. Instead of a nice zoom rocker here, they seem to have used a wide and telly button. A zoom rocker would have been much nicer. There will be two versions available, version 1 which will just have a USB-C interface and version 2 which will have a USB-C and 20-pin interface. Both of these will provide remote control of the zoom with the Canon Camera Connect app, add support for Canon's XE protocol with the C70, allow for zoom operation to be assigned to buttons on certain camera bodies, and allow for power to be fed into the USB-C for higher speed control. The 20-pin version will enable the use of standard Canon zoom and focus demands. As of the release of this video, the pricing of the servo unit is just over £1,000 for the USB version, with the 20-pin one being roughly £500 more. Personally, I think this is too expensive, especially when compared to the optional servo for Canon's previous C&E zooms like the 18-80, which used the ZSG C10, which was only £429 and looks much nicer than these units. These aren't shipping until March, but I'm intrigued to see how it feels on the lens and how it performs overall. This new lens is a true workhorse, and I can see both photographers and filmmakers lusting after it thanks to its excellent blend of features. The combination of its focal range and aperture make it an incredibly flexible lens that is pretty unique. It's sharp, has solid optical stabilization, and performs well for video shooters. It's a well-designed, modern-looking lens that I'm sure professionals are going to love. But its pretty steep price of £3,600 will price it out for many people. But you are paying a premium here for the combination of so many features that don't really exist in another lens like this. Whether it makes sense to invest into for you will come down to you. But if you want some more detailed advice on your next gear purchase, get in contact with our team via the link below. Anyway, let us know what you think of the Canon 24-105mm f2.8, and if you have any further questions in the comments below. And if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.